Today, we are diving into one of the most complicated and frankly contradictory figures in all of Roman history, Emperor Diocletian. This is a man who single-handedly pulled the Roman Empire back from the edge of total annihilation, a genius administrator, a ruthless commander. But he was also the architect of the most vicious, empire-wide persecution of Christians ever. He was a restorer for sure, but he was also a monster. So let's try and unravel this guy.
Now, to really get Diocletian, you first have to understand the world he was born into. The 3rd century AD was, and I'm not exaggerating, an absolute dumpster fire for Rome. Historians call it the crisis of the 3rd century, but that's putting it mildly. Imagine 50 years of nonstop civil war, economic collapse, plagues, and barbarian invasions. The empire wasn't just sick, it was on the operating table, and the doctors had left the room. It was coming apart at the seams.
So here's our game plan for this explainer. First, we're going to look at just how bad this crisis was. Then, we'll see the wild solution that came from a soldier who was definitely not part of the old boys club. We'll explore how he completely changed the job of emperor, turning himself into a living god. Fourth, we have to confront the darkest part of his story, the Great Persecution. And finally, we'll tackle that big question. Was this guy a savior, a villain, or somehow both? So just how bad did things get? Well, picture this. Being the Roman emperor was basically the most dangerous job in the world. The average reign was just a few years before you were almost certainly assassinated. That was the norm. The entire system was broken, and it was going to take a fundamental, and I mean brutal, reset to fix it. You know, the craziest part is how all these disasters fed into each other. It was a domino effect from hell. The army would just declare their general the new emperor, which kicked off another civil war. To pay the soldiers, emperors would just mint more coins with less silver, which caused money to become worthless and led to insane hyperinflation. And with no money and constant infighting, how are you going to defend the borders from invading armies? You can't. It was this vicious, grinding cycle that was turning the world's greatest empire to dust.
And then, into this complete mess, walks a guy named Diocles. Now, this wasn't some fancy Roman noble from an old family. Oh no, this was a tough-as-nails career soldier from the provinces. A guy who clawed his way up from nothing, based on pure talent and, let's be honest, ruthlessness. And he had a plan. He wasn't there to just patch things up. He was there to tear the whole system down and rebuild it from scratch.
Diocletian's backstory is straight out of a movie. He was born to a family with zero connections. Maybe his dad was a scribe or even a former slave. And he joined the army, rising through the ranks during the most dangerous period in Roman history. So how'd he get the top job? Pure, raw military politics. The emperor dies under, let's call them, suspicious circumstances. So what does Diocletian do? In front of the entire army, he points to the head of the imperial guard, accuses him of murder, and then, boom, runs him through with his own sword, right then and there. His men declare him emperor, he changes his name to the fancier-sounding Diocletian, and just like that, he was the master of the Roman world.
Now, Diocletian was, above all else, a brutally practical man. He looked at the last 50 years of chaos, and he realized something crucial. The problem wasn't just a string of bad emperors. The problem was the job of emperor. It was impossible. The empire was just too big, with too many problems popping up all at once. How could one guy be in Britain fighting off raiders and in Syria fighting the Persians at the same time? You couldn't. The job itself was a death trap. So he came up with his masterstroke, the thing he's most famous for, the tetrarchy. It basically means the rule of 4. The logic was simple. If the empire is too big for one man to run, then don't have one man run it. Divide the labor. Now, he didn't split the empire apart. That's key. It was still one Rome. He just split the job of being emperor into 4 roles.
Okay, so here's how this 4-man show was supposed to work. You've got 2 senior emperors, the Augusti. They were the big bosses. Diocletian took the east, and he gave the west to his trusted friend Maximian. Then, each big boss appoints a junior emperor, a Caesar, who acts as his deputy and, crucially, his chosen heir. This was supposed to solve 2 problems at once. You get a leader in every hotspot, and, this was the real game changer, you get a clear line of succession. No more murdering your way to the top. There was now a ladder. But he didn't just stop with the tetrarchy. Oh no, the guy was a whirlwind of reform. He chopped up the old provinces into over 100 smaller ones. Why? to keep any one governor from getting powerful enough to start a rebellion. Smart. He massively expanded the army, and he tried to fix the economy. He brought in a whole new tax system, and he even issued an edict on maximum prices, trying to cap the price of everything from chicken to haircuts. It was a total failure. It just created a massive black market, but it tells you everything you need to know about him. He wanted total top-down control.
And here's the thing. These reforms weren't just about making the government run better. Something much, much bigger was changing. Diocletian wasn't just fixing the empire. He was changing what it meant to be the emperor.
See, for 300 years, emperors had played this game, pretending to be the princeps, or first citizen. I'm just one of you guys guiding the state. Diocletian took that script and lit it on fire. He demanded to be called Dominus et Deus, master and God. He wasn't your equal, he was your master. He wore silk and jewels, and you had to literally prostrate yourself on the floor to speak to him. It sounds like a massive ego trip, right? And maybe it was. But it was also smart politics. It made the emperor a sacred, untouchable figure, much harder to assassinate.
And he took this even further. He wasn't just like a god. He basically said he was chosen by them. He called himself Jovius, meaning he was connected to Jupiter, the king of the gods. His partner Maximian was Herculeus, linked to Hercules. So their rule wasn't just politics anymore. It was the divine mission. And when you believe you're on a mission from God, well, anyone who gets in your way isn't just an opponent, they're an enemy of heaven itself. And that is a very, very dangerous idea. Which brings us to the darkest chapter of his reign. You see, this new system of total unity demanded total conformity. But what happens when a group of people says, actually, we've got a different lord, a higher king? And that group was, of course, the Christians. By the year 300, Christians weren't some tiny fringe cult anymore. We're talking about maybe 10% of the entire empire's population. They had organized churches, a network of bishops, and members at every level of society, even in the army and the palace. For a control freak like Diocletian, who was obsessed with unity, this was a nightmare, a state within his state. So, why the sudden, horrific violence? Well, a few reasons. He had his junior emperor Galerius constantly whispering in his ear about how dangerous the Christians were, and Diocletian himself was suspicious of their network. But the real problem? It came down to worship. Christians refused to sacrifice to the Roman gods, which also meant refusing to sacrifice to the emperor's divine spirit. In Diocletian's system, that wasn't just a different religious opinion, that was treason. It was a direct challenge to his authority and a danger to the entire empire. So, in 303, he unleashed the Great Persecution. And this wasn't random mob violence. This was cold, calculated, bureaucratic evil, rolled out in 4 stages. First, they went for the infrastructure, destroying churches, burning scriptures. Then, they came for the leaders, arresting every priest and bishop they could find. The third edict was a cruel choice: sacrifice to the gods and go free, or stay in prison. But the fourth and final edict, that was pure terror. It commanded every single man, woman, and child in the empire to make a public sacrifice. If you refused, the penalty was torture and death. The goal was simple: the complete and total eradication of Christianity. And then, right at the peak of this horrific campaign, Diocletian does the most unbelievable thing. In 305 AD, after a bad illness, he just quits. He becomes the first Roman emperor to ever voluntarily give up power. He forced his co-emperor to retire with him and went home to a gigantic palace he built. He famously told people who begged him to come back to power that if they could see the beautiful cabbages he was growing, they wouldn't ask him to. He just walked away, leaving everyone else to clean up his mess. So, what are we supposed to do with a guy like this? The brilliant reformer who saved the state? The brutal tyrant who unleashed a wave of terror? And the only emperor who ever just clocked out and went home? His legacy is, to put it lightly, a paradox. All right, let's try to sum it up with 5 key points. 1, he was the restorer. No doubt about it, he ended the chaos. 2, he was the innovator. The tetrarchy was a radical, bold idea. 3, he was the autocrat. He killed the old idea of the first citizen and became an absolute master. 4, he was the persecutor. His attempt to destroy Christianity is a permanent dark stain on his name. And 5, the abdicator, the man who had all the power in the world and just gave it away. So what do modern historians think? Well, it's complicated. Many see his tough actions as a product of historical necessity. Basically, the empire was on fire, and he was the only one with a fire extinguisher, even if it was a brutal one. His reforms really did lay the groundwork for the Byzantine Empire to survive for another 1,000 years. But his rigid belief that he could control everything, from the price of an egg to what a person believed in their soul, that was a catastrophic imperial overreach that caused unbelievable suffering.
And that really leaves us with this final, unsettling question. Diocletian's story forces us to look at a very uncomfortable truth about power and history. He absolutely saved the Roman state, but the price was horrifying. His life is a chilling reminder that the line between a strong leader and a tyrant, between restoring order and ruthless persecution, can be terrifyingly razor thin. So can a single person be both a savior and a monster? The life of Diocletian seems to scream that the answer is yes.